and Visarga are two, the creation, the initial creation, and the subsequent creation or engineering of the universe are two important topics that have to be included in every Mahapurana. The four Kumaras are such essential players in future, and Narada Muni as well, are such essential players in future pastimes of the Bhagavatam. Narada Muni, he's instructing Prahlad, he's instructing Yudhishthir, he's taking part in Krishna's pastimes in the 10th canto, and his instructions are so central to so many, both philosophical teachings and the pastimes of the Bhagavatam. And the four Kumaras, they're so important and essential, founding their own sampradaya, and essential in bringing down some of the major avatars. Because of the cursing of the four Kumaras, we have Varaha avatar, we have Hiranyakashipu and Nrsingadev's appearance, who are the cursed Jai and Vijay. So brought those appearances there, and later on in Krishna's Leela and in Ram's Leela, these Jai and Vijay cursed by the four Kumars make an appearance. So all of these very important philosophical principles and important persons are being introduced in the list. And some of them are just there for whatever reason. Dutta Goswami and Vyasadeva chose to include them. The avatars of the Lord are unlimited, so you can make unlimited lists of different important or relevant avatars according to your purpose. So anyway, Kapila is one of them, the fifth incarnation. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says this numbering, first incarnation, second, fifth incarnation, is not necessarily sequential, it's just the numbering of this particular list. So this fifth incarnation is Lord Kapila Dev, foremost amongst the perfected beings. He came to teach this Sankhya Yoga because it was Kala Viplutam, it had been lost in time. So this is what the incarnate Krishna himself and his different incarnations do. Evam parampara prakrami marmajarshayo vidu sa kalaneha mahata yoga nashta parantapa. That when this teaching of yoga, this teaching of spiritual life and philosophy, when it's lost, sa kalaneha, when it's lost in time, then he comes again, the succession gets broken, so the science appears to be lost. So Krishna comes and he restarts that thread, as he did with the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, to restart that thread, as he did in so many cases, yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata. When the teaching of religion and proper philosophy and proper behavior becomes glani, becomes distorted, then Krishna comes and he straightens things out again. So he did this with this Kapila avatar. And these teachings of Kapila are, although in another place in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada discussing the incarnations, said Kapila, I can't remember the exact words he used, he said secondary or not as important in the whole list of avatars, but actually it's important. It takes up a significant part of the Bhagavatam, the whole end of the third canto, the last, 8 or 10 chapters of the third canto are the life and the teachings of Kapila Dev. So it's important to understand, and Prabhupada would mention and discuss him fairly often. So he came to teach this Sankhya Yoga. We've gone over before in discussing the Purusha avatars, and Prabhupada mentions again the 24 elements. I won't go into the details, but just to refresh everyone's memory, the 24 elements are earth, water, fire, air, ether, the 5 gross elements, mind, intelligence, and false ego, the 3 subtle elements, the 5 knowledge gathering senses of sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch, the 5 senses of action, the arms, legs, tongue, genitals, and anus, and the 5 objects of the senses, the things we see, the objects of sight, the objects of sound, etc., the tanmachas. So these are the 24 elements, and Lord Kapila came to teach and analyze this. So let's start off by discussing a little bit about the life of Lord Kapila Dev in summary. So early in the creation of the universe, there was a great, great Muni, a great sage and yogi, Kardama Muni. And as sages do, for a long, long time, he was in the forest in his ashram, performing very strict austerities and intense meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and long, long time as a completely fixed up brahmachari. And his meditation was so intense and so fixed on the Lord and so full of devotion that the Lord himself appeared before Kardama Muni. And Kardama Muni actually submitted a desire before him. Actually, this section of the Bhagavatam, long, long ago in a previous yuga, when I first started thinking about desiring to get married, I spoke to Niranjana Swami. And he suggested that I read this section of the Bhagavatam about Kardama Muni, study it. So Kardama Muni, he submitted himself before the Lord and he said, I have this desire, I'd like to have a wife. He was maybe even a little embarrassed, but he submitted this before the Lord. And Prabhupada said that when you submit your desires before the Lord, then the Lord will fulfill your desires even more than you asked for. So Kardama Muni, he wanted a wife, a nice wife. And as he got his wife, the princess of the entire universe, creation, the daughter of Manu. Manu came with his daughter before Kardama Muni and offered his daughter Devahuti to Kardama Muni. So Lord Krishna fulfilled his desire in such a wonderful way. And they got married, but Kardama Muni said, yes, we'll get married, we'll do everything, but I'm also a sage. So after a child is born, I'm going back to my life of meditation. So they were married for a long, long time. And their marriage was living in the forest and doing very severe austerities together. Devahuti was just as strict and just as fixed up and just as devoted as her husband Kardama Muni. So for a long, long time, they did austerities and they both got, practically hardly eating and just meditating and doing puja all day. So after a long time of that, finally they consummated their marriage. And first they produced, and that's a whole story, that Kardama Muni, by his mystic powers, created a big palace and great opulence and an environment suitable for cultivating that aspect of the husband and wife relationship. So he created that by his mystic power, and they enjoyed that aspect of family life for a very long time, and finally produced 9 daughters, 9 very highly qualified, chaste, intelligent, well-qualified daughters. And those 9 daughters were given away. At that time, Lord Brahma came and he arranged for those 9 daughters to be given in marriage to the 9 sages, the 9 principal sages of the universe. He arranged that as the grandfather. Lord Brahma is called Pitamaha, but in this case, he was actually literally Pitamaha because this was early in the creation, and Kardama Muni was one of the very early sages in the universe. So he was literally like the grandson of Lord Brahma, the Pitamaha. So after those 9 daughters, Devahuti said, yes, they've had 9 daughters, but as a woman, I need a son to protect me since you're going to go away. So again, they had one more child. And that child was Kapila Dev. Prabhupada says, this is from his purport, he said, Kardama Muni desired to beget a child who would be a ray of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should beget a child who can perform the duties of Vishnu. Otherwise, there is no need to produce children. There are 2 kinds of children born of good fathers. One is educated in Krishna consciousness so that he can be delivered from the clutches of Maya in that very life. and the other is a ray of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is a heavy responsibility for those of us who are parents. Sometimes we may imagine that our child is a ray of Vishnu. So that's very rare and very difficult, but at least we could teach our children, fulfill the other half, teach our children to take up Krishna consciousness. But Kardama Muni was actually qualified to have this ray of Vishnu, this Amsa, this incarnation of Vishnu as his child. So they had this child, Kapila Dev. In that third canto where this is all described, Maitreya explained to Vidura, Bhagavantam Param Brahma, that this child was Bhagavantam Param Brahma. He's the supreme Brahman. He's Bhagavan, the supreme personality of Godhead. Satvam Sena Satruhan Tattva Sankyana Vigyaptyai Jatam Vidvam Aja Swarat. That although he's Aja, unborn, Jatam, he took birth as, let's see, Satvena Amsena, as an Amsena of the supremely pure personality of Godhead. And what did he come for? Tattva Sankyana Vigyaptyai. He came to teach this process of Sankhya Yoga. Then he goes on, let's see. And again, to teach that which was lost. Kala Viplutam, he came to teach this lost art, this lost science of Sankhya Yoga. And after he appeared, and he appeared in this very beautiful form, he's described as Hiranyakesha. We know this word Hiranyakashipu, who's fond of gold and soft bedding. So Hiranyakesha means Kapila had beautiful golden colored hair. And in paintings of him, we normally see him portrayed as blonde with this golden colored hair, with big, beautiful, long lotus eyes and the marks of lotus on his beautiful feet. So this is the appearance of Kapila Dev. He came to teach this Sankhya, to save the conditioned souls from the, let's see. Yes, this is from the third canto also, with lotus eyes and marks of lotus on his feet. He told his parents that he came to teach Sankhya, to save the conditioned souls from the sufferings of material life, and that this teaching had been lost in time. Sakalane Hamata Yoga Nashta, just like in Bhagavad Gita. So he came to teach this, but Kardama Muni said, okay, I have a son to take care of my wife. Now I'm actually going to leave. So this is puzzling. He's leaving for the sake of spiritual life, but the same Supreme Lord he worshipped had appeared as a son, yet still he's leaving, which may seem odd or contradictory or even bizarre to us, but that's his adherence to the Vedic principles, and also part of the pastime. Part of the pastime, so that Kapila Dev is left with his good mother Devahuti, showing how qualified is Devahuti, that she was chosen as the one to receive these complex and important teachings of Sankhya Yoga. How qualified is Arjuna that Krishna chose him to hear the Bhagavad Gita? And how qualified is Parikshit Maharaj that he was the one to receive the entire Srimad Bhagavatam from Shukadev, or the sages of Naimisharanya to hear from Sutta Goswami? Because in the transmission of spiritual knowledge, the recipient is practically speaking as important as the speaker. So how qualified is Devahuti? So she received over the course of these chapters, many chapters of the third canto, these wonderful teachings of Kapila Dev about devotional service and about the material elements and the structure and creation and dissolution of the material world and the entanglement of the living entities and their process of liberation from that entanglement. And she received that knowledge perfectly and absorbed it perfectly. And she offered, at the end of that, she offered so many wonderful prayers, beautiful prayers to her son Kapila Dev. Maybe one of the most famous of them is probably this Aho Bata Swapachato Gariyan. Yajiva gre vartate namatu vyam te pustapaste juhuva shishnor arya brahmanuchor nama grenantiete. That how amazing is it? How wonderful is it that one who worships the supreme, that one who takes the holy name of the Lord, of Kapila Dev, of Krishna, and chants that holy name, that even if he's swapacha, even if he appears in a family of dog eaters, he's the lowest of the low. But if such a person takes the holy name of the Lord, then he's immediately surpassed anyone who performs all ashrameda or Vedic rituals, or going to places of pilgrimage, or studying the Yajurveda. Simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord, one surpasses that. So that's her conclusion from understanding the science of Sankhya Yoga, that you take up the chanting of the holy name and you've immediately surpassed everything. So this is Devahuti's amazing qualification and the wonderful appearance of Kapila Dev. And again, in one sense, you could say minor, but his teachings are very important. And the understanding he gives is very important. So what is that understanding? What is Sankhya Yoga? What is Sankhya? We know in Vedic philosophy, there's what is called Saddarshan, or 6 bona fide philosophies, and one of these is Sankhya. The best of them, the topmost of them is Vedanta. But along with Nyaya, logic, and Mimamsa, and yoga, and all of these others is Sankhya. It's bona fide philosophy, proper Vedic philosophy. So what is it? Prabhupada says, well, European philosophers call this metaphysics. So what's metaphysics? I had a vague idea of what metaphysics is. Wikipedia says metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that examines the fundamental nature of reality, including the relationship between the mind and matter, between the substance and its attribute, and between potentiality and actuality. So this is actually a pretty great definition of Sankhya Yoga. The relationship between mind and matter, the relationship between the subtle consciousness and matter, between the soul and matter. Wikipedia is not going to talk about the soul. So with mind, we can include mind, intelligence, false ego, and the soul. The relationship between that and matter, the fundamental nature of reality, breaking it down into the composite elements of Mahatattva, and the Mahabhuta, and the gross elements and subtle elements, the relation between the substance and the attribute. What is the thing and what are its qualities? What is the substance? What is the source of something and what is the emanation? What is the potentiality? What is the source or origin and the actuality or the emanation? So this is a wonderful, actually, definition of what Sankhya Yoga is. Prabhupada also says that Sankhya Yoga means, etymologically, he says, that which explains very lucidly by analysis of the material elements. So this is Sankhya: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego, Mahatattva. Understanding all of these things is Sankhya. Or even we could say basic things, that I'm not this body. This is Sankhya. It's discriminating. It's differentiating what is matter, what is spirit. Like Wikipedia says, the difference between mind and matter. So understanding I'm not this body is a element of Sankhya Yoga. Understanding Janmadhyasya, that Krishna is the source of the creation, maintenance, and destruction of everything. This is an element of Sankhya Yoga. Even more literally, Sankhya means counting or enumerating. Just like in this very chapter, at the end of the list of avatars given in this chapter, there's the verse, let's see. Avatar, this is text 26, so coming up in, I don't know, a couple of weeks. Avatara Yasankhya. Sankhya means counting. Asankhya means not counting or not countable. So avatara hyasankyeya hare sattvaneder dvija, that these incarnations of the Lord are innumerable, or literally asankyeya, literally uncountable, just like innumerable rivulets flowing from an inexhaustible source of water. So this is Sankhya, or the prayers to the six Goswamis. Sankhya Purva Kanama Gani Nativi Kalavasani Krito. Sankhya Purvaka means they're counting. What are they counting? They're counting their rounds. So this Sankhya means counting or enumerating all the material elements. So this is Sankhya. Let's see. So enumerating the material elements, just like earth, water, fire, air, ether. And it's very interesting. Sankhya is basically, or the modern version of Sankhya is basically physics or science. In his Jaiva Dharma, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when talking about the gross elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, he renames them. Instead of saying earth, water, fire, air, ether, he says solids, liquids, radiant energy, gases, and space. So this is modern terminology describing the same thing. Earth means solid substances. Water means liquid substances. So this is the same thing that's examined in modern science and modern physics. We learn about solids, liquids, gases, electromagnetic radiation, space. Space could be, you'd say dimension, or if we want to get even more esoteric, the space-time continuum, which is the background against which the whole universe is resting or taking place. So basically, modern science is really just Sankhya. It's another version of Sankhya. And just like in Vedic Sankhya, when I gave class last, we discussed how there's so many different groupings or ways of grouping the different material energies. So in modern science, you could speak of solids, liquids, gases, electromagnetic radiation. For example, you may use that analysis if you're an engineer or a manufacturer. Or if you're a chemist, you may classify hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, like that. A different classification, a different Sankhya, a different counting of the material elements. Or if you're an astrophysicist, you may talk about baryons and dark matter and dark energy, like that. Or you may talk about quarks and bosons and leptons. So conceptually, modern science, modern physics is really just Sankhya. We say earth, water, fire, air, ether. They classify differently, but it's the same idea. And in fact, a scientist or a modern person may say, well, saying earth, water, fire, air, ether, this is a primitive analysis, but hydrogen, helium, carbon, oxygen, this is a scientific analysis. This is a sophisticated analysis, not a primitive analysis. So in answer to that, you could say, well, what is the purpose of analyzing as hydrogen, helium, oxygen, carbon? It's produced many amazing things. This computer that allows us to do this, and modern science. I am not at all a hater of modern science. I'm actually a lover and admirer of modern science. But in its godlessness, it's also caused a lot of problems. Pollution and bombs and poisons and toxins and so many things are also produced out of this understanding of hydrogen, helium, carbon, oxygen, etc. And you may say, well, earth, water, fire, air, ether is primitive, but what's the goal of that understanding? That's an analysis that is very useful and very conducive for understanding the nature of the self, the source of our being, the purpose of our existence, the nature of the universe, and the nature of God, who is the source of it. So that is not at all an unsophisticated or an unimportant analysis. So earth, water, fire, air, ether may not be very useful if you want to manufacture something in a factory or in a laboratory. But if you want to understand the nature of God, the nature of the soul, it's a very sophisticated and very important analysis. So Sankhya is no less sophisticated and certainly no less important than the Sankhya of modern science. But this also points out the danger of Sankhya. 90% of the time when Prabhupada mentions Kapila Dev, he doesn't do it in this purport, but most of the time when he mentions Kapila, he brings up this issue that there's another atheist Kapila or an imposter Kapila who came later, who teaches an atheistic brand of Sankhya. In other words, a material analysis, but without including the spiritual nature of the jiva and the Supreme Personality of Godhead who creates it all. So this is the danger of Sankhya, that in this in-depth analysis of all the different aspects of material nature, very minutely and very complexly analyzing it in all its complexity, it is possible for one to lose sight of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's certainly the central dilemma of modern science as we devotees see it. Prabhupada was once speaking with a scientist, a fairly well-known scientist, Dr. Gregory Benford. I don't know if there's any fans of science fiction out there, but Dr. Benford also went on, I think after his meeting with Prabhupada, to become a fairly significant science fiction novelist. And in that discussion, it's a very interesting discussion. But one of the things they're talking about, Prabhupada is explaining this Sankhya a little bit, how everything is coming from the Supreme Personality of God, and all the elements and all the aspects of creation are coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and it's all in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he criticizes the material scientists. He says they may waste their time. They're just studying the elements, he gives the example of studying the grass, and they may devote so many years just to studying the grass. And Dr. Benford responds, well, the grass is also coming from Krishna, so what's wrong with studying the grass? And Prabhupada's response is, it's not that studying the grass is wrong, it's that you're neglecting Krishna, who is the source of the grass. So this is the dilemma of material scientists and the dilemma of Sankhya, that one loses sight. Literally, you could say can't see the forest for the trees, so you can't see Krishna for the cloud of all the 24 material elements that you're focusing your attention on. So this is the balance, the proper balance in studying Sankhya. And that's why if you look at Lord Kapila's teachings in the Bhagavatam, he discusses all the intricacies of the elements, but he focuses so strongly on devotional service in those chapters. These are the chapter titles from that third canto of the Bhagavatam. Chapter 25, Lord Kapila's teachings to his mother, Devahuti. Chapter 25 is the glories of devotional service. Then after that, chapter 26, he discusses fundamental principles of material nature. And after that, understanding material nature. Then again, chapter 28, Kapila's instructions on the execution of devotional service. And chapter 29, explanation of devotional service by Lord Kapila. So in these chapters, he starts off explaining the glories of devotional service. Then he explains, okay, here's the material nature, and the elements are like this, and they interact like this, and they're created and withdrawn and multiplied and divided, etc., like this. Then he goes back, and again, devotional service. So this is the proper way to understand Sankhya Yoga. It's actually meant for devotional service. It's meant for understanding and worshiping Lord Kapila Dev and all the avatars and avatari Lord Krishna, who is the source of all of them. Ete chamsa kalapam sam Krishnas tu bhagavan swayam injari vyakulam lokam mridayanti yuge yuge. So this is the purpose. Sankhya is for bringing us to Krishna. Just like science, real science is really meant for taking us to Krishna. But the scientists, they get lost in the grass and in the atoms and in the elements and in the quarks and in the this and the that, not seeing Krishna who's behind it all. And when you forget that, and that's also why in today's class, First thing I discussed was Lord Kapila's appearance, because if we don't understand that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead teaching devotional service, then whatever else we may learn about Sankhya is useless. Prabhupada says, let's see. This foolishness will continue until one comes to the platform of understanding self-realization. Otherwise, all these universities and institutions for imparting knowledge are a continuation of that same ignorance and foolishness. Unless one comes to the point of asking, what am I? What is God? What is this world? What is my relationship with God in this world? So this is Sankhya. This is the real Sankhya. What am I? What is God? What is this world? What is my relationship with God in this world? This is the actual ultimate understanding of Sankhya. If you just look at the elements in their interactions, that's not real Sankhya. That's a pale, atheistic shadow of the real Sankhya. So, just like at the very end, at the end of the 25th chapter in Lord Kapila's teachings, I'll read a couple of verses from the end of that chapter. Bhakti yogena yogina, kshemaya paramula me pravishyantya kuto bayam. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the first line. Jnana vairagya yuktena, bhakti yogena yogina, kshemaya paramula me pravishyantya kuto bayam. The yogis, equipped with transcendental knowledge and renunciation, and engaged in devotional service for their eternal benefit, take shelter of my lotus feet. And since I am the Lord, they are thus eligible to enter into the kingdom of Godhead without fear. And then he says, Etavan evaloke smin pumsam nishreya sodaya, tivrena bhakti yogena manomai arpitam stiram. Therefore, persons whose minds are fixed on the Lord engage in the intensive practice of devotional service. That is the only means for attainment of the final perfection of life. So our business is devotional service. And in the course of that, we do a little yoga in the sense of, for example, yama and niyama. Our four regulative principles given by Prabhupada are our yama and niyama of the yoga process. And we do some meditation when we sit down to chant japa, that's a meditation. We do karma yoga, japa yagyosmi, our chanting japa is our yagya, and doing all our work for Krishna is our yagya. From the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, yagyartat, how's that verse go? Who can refresh my memory?
3rd chapter. Yagyartat karmanonyatva lokoyam karma bandhana.
Yaloka, that working for Krishna, this is our yagya. Work must be done as an offering to Vishnu, as a sacrifice to Vishnu. Yagya. Yagya as Vishnu will also be discussed in 2 more verses of this chapter. So we have our karma aspects of karma yoga, of meditation, out of Sankhya. Again, understanding we're not this body. What is the nature of this material world? What is the nature of Krishna? And what is our relationship with them? This is Sankhya. But the conclusion is always Bhakti Yoga. And all of these other things are subsumed under Bhakti Yoga. This is our understanding. And actually, when one is mature, he understands that there's no difference. Prabhupada's purport from 239 Bhagavad Gita. He says, Lord Krishna made an analytical description of the soul just to bring Arjuna to the point of Buddha Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. Therefore, Lord Krishna's Sankhya and Lord Kapila's Sankhya, as described in the Bhagavatam, are one and the same. They are all Bhakti Yoga. Lord Krishna said, therefore, that only the less intelligent class of men make a distinction between Sankhya Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. And then he quotes, in that purport, he quotes from Bhagavad Gita 5:4, Sankhya Yoga Pratag Bala Pravadanti Na Pandita. That if you think there's a difference between Sankhya Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, Na Pandita, you're not a Pandit, you're not learned. So only the ignorant make a distinction. So if you separate Sankhya from Bhakti, as the atheistic Sankhya-ites do, as the material scientists do, then na pandita, you're not actually very intelligent. That's why also Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that the more material educated a man becomes, the more he becomes an ass. Because pursuing that without understanding Bhakti Yoga, na pandita, not very intelligent. But when you understand they're the same, then when you read the Bhagavad Gita, you're not this body. You understand this is part of Bhakti Yoga. And when you study earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego, mahatattva, senses, sense objects, this is Bhakti Yoga, because it leads you to worshiping Krishna and to taking Krishna's name on your tongue. And by doing that, you surpass all Vedic knowledge, all ritualistic knowledge, all Brahminical duties, all surpassed just by doing that. So this is what Sankhya Yoga should do. It should convince us of the nature of this material world, la de tapakari, that it's temporary, that it seems to give pleasure, and it also gives suffering. The supreme blissful nature of Lord Krishna, the nature of the spirit soul, that we're part and parcel of Krishna and are meant for a loving eternal relationship with Krishna, and should direct us and inspire us to engage in his devotional service. Sankhya Yoga is just another tool in our arsenal of tools for staying fixed and inspired and active in devotional service. That we understand this material world and it inspires us to perform devotional service. And this is the gift of Kapila Dev and the gift of Krishna and the gift of Srila Prabhupada teaching us about this. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Are there any questions, comments, or discussions on this? Oh, also, just briefly, going back to Bhagavad Gita, I just wanted to throw this in. Bhagavad Gita 10:26, the opulence of the absolute. Ashwatha Sarvavrikshanam Devarshinam Chanarada Gandharvanam Chitarata Siddhanam Kapilo Muni. That of all trees I am the banyan tree, of the sages among the demigods I am Narada, of the Gandharvas I am Chitrarata, and among perfected beings I am the sage Kapila. Also in today's verse, Kapila Dev is referred to as Siddhesha, as the best of all the perfected beings. So Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he chose two sages as his, among the sages I am these. So he said, among the sages, among the demigods, I am Narada, because Narada's opulence is his teaching of devotional service and his embodiment of devotional service. And he also chooses to represent himself as the sage Kapila Dev for his exquisite teachings about the nature of the material world and the relationship of that with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thank you. Questions or comments, please?
Humble Pranam Prabhu, this is Vatsala.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, glory to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for elaborating on the Sankhya philosophy. I used to be a teacher, taught chemistry and all the physical science and all. I never related this counting or, the elements that we teach in the periodic table. That could be related to Krishna. But we know, on the whole, we know everything belongs to Krishna. Everything comes from Krishna. But, I could never associate that, I can never bring it up to the students. And you have explained it so beautifully and very nicely. Everything, goes back to Krishna. So
Yes.
I like the explanation what you gave. And it was really elaborate, a detailed description of what it is supposed to mean. And I enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Prabhu. And you quoted some chapters, 26, 25. I didn't get it. I was trying to write it down. You said you mentioned chapter 25, 29.
Yeah, the life and the teachings of Kapila Dev is mostly recounted in the third canto. His teachings to his mother Devahuti started third canto, text 25.
Oh, okay.
And go on until the end of the third canto.
Okay. Okay. So, and then you mentioned chapter 26 and chapter 29 too.
Yeah, all of those. Yeah, I was just, giving the names of the different chapters, just showing how, first he talks about devotional service, then he talks about what you would call Samkhya, the analysis of material nature, and then again back to devotional service. So in other words, he starts with devotional service and ends with devotional service. And in the middle, he's also discussing the nature of material creation. But it's all devotional service.
Yes.
Like Prabhupada said, that only a less intelligent person distinguishes. But it's all devotional service.
Thank you,
We want to
Prabhu.
but as devotees, we want to make sure that we're always very explicitly about devotional service.
Yeah, very well explained. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Acharya Prabhu, can you see the hands that are raised?
If
you can.
Let me see. I
can call on them.
Not seeing that.
It's okay.
I don't know how to manage
Mother
that.
Renika, and then after Mother Renika, Ram Sham Prabhu. In that order.
Thank you, Prabhu, for today's class. I kind of, in the beginning, I was skeptical whether this ISKCON thing is like a hoax or like, it has any scientific basis to it. And I was part of this International Society for Spirituality, where I had listened to some lectures from IIT, professors from IIT from India. And I was I totally bought into this philosophy. But when there is so much scientific backing, how come the intellectuals, the intelligentsia, the class of intelligentsia, how come they don't get attracted to ISKCON? Because there is really a very thorough scientific basis for this Sankhya theory. And I was totally impressed with the slide deck that IIT professor shared and the way he explained the Sankhya theory and all that. And now from today's talk, you even reiterated the same fact. How come then this concept of science-backed spirituality is not popular among the masses?
That's a good question and interesting question. I don't have a full answer, except I'll just throw out a few ideas. First of all, almost everyone in the material world is more interested in material life than spiritual life. That's one thing. Second of all, science, again, in particular, like I said, that the danger of Sankhya, which is the danger of science, is that you get wrapped up in the creation and don't think about the creator. And secondly, there are some people who actually are interested in how science relates to spirituality. It's not unheard of in the sciences, although it is a minority. Especially if you're interested in that subject, His Holiness Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, who has passed away and who used to run the Bhaktivedanta Institute, or be a large part of the Bhaktivedanta Institute, which was founded by scientifically trained devotees for this particular purpose. He did a lot of work with that. And actually some years ago, he held a big conference in India, inviting scientists and even Nobel laureates. And actually, even this Dr. Gregory Benford, who I mentioned, he also wrote a paper for that big meeting where he fondly remembered his time meeting Srila Prabhupada. And actually, I read this because I read science fiction, my admission. He actually wrote a fictionalized account of his meeting with Prabhupada and included it in one of his novels. So there is some work being done on this by devotees, although not many. For a devotee who actually is part of the scientific community, that's a good preaching field. And Prabhupada was interested in that. That's why he had the devotees found the Bhaktivedanta Institute. But scientists are also materialists, just like everyone around the world. So it's, again, not surprising if they don't see the connection with spiritual life, but some do. And by intelligent and determined preaching, maybe a few more can be opened up to that aspect also. That's not really an answer, but just some thoughts on it. Is that all right?
Yeah, but if you talk about spirituality to today's youth, I mean, my daughter straight away says, no, it's very hard to convince her, tell her all this. No, it's not just spiritual. It's not like, it's something beyond. It's very hard to convince today's youth.
It is. It is hard to convince people, not just today's youth, in the past also, and in the future, it'll be hard. And sometimes you just can't, you can't always convince people, but the preacher, the person who is preaching or teaching or trying to give this to the other also needs to be intelligent how to introduce it, how to make it relevant, how much to introduce. Just like, again, if you're speaking to a scientist, you may discuss in one way. If you're speaking to a family member, you may discuss in a different way. If you're speaking to an ordinary person, you may discuss it in a different way. So it's also our ability and intelligence and finesse as a preacher, how to properly frame and tailor the message so it's relevant to a person. But you can't convince everyone. That's not going to happen. That's utopian. But we do the best we can.
Sure. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Danvat Pranam, all Galuch Srila Prabhupada. Prabhuji, very nice, wonderful session. You covered a lots of points.
Can you speak just a little bit louder, please?
Can you hear me, Prabhuji, now?
Yes.
Let me see whether my speaker is correct. Yeah, so you mentioned many points. You covered lots of points. That was really wonderful, and it's a really good session for today. And so I was having a question related, means two clarification need on that. Number one is a small kind of the incarnations. When I go to the verse by verse later on, it goes till like verse 25 till 25. It's 19th and 20th incarnation as the Balram and Krishna and Balram, and then
Yes.
after that Buddha and Kalki.
Yes.
So it covers till 2021 incarnation in sequence in this Bhagavatam. So is it kind of chronological numbers it is given, like today we are doing this incarnation, 5th incarnation, 6th incarnation, 19th, 20th incarnation, 21st incarnation. So is this fixed kind of any number, like yesterday I also I was roaming around wondering, Dasavatara we have that any 10 numbers. And
right.
Somewhere we read 24, numbers. But here in the sloka itself, 5th, 6th, 7th, and that number name is also given for that. So that means somewhere it is fixed on that position, that incarnation. So can you please clarify on that, Prabhuji?
Yes, I'll do my best. Now, just looking at this list, it does seem to be at least to some degree in chronological order, that it starts with the Purusha avatars, the 4 Kumars who were created at the beginning of the creation. Here we have Kapila Dev who came early in the creation, and then later on is coming Krishna, and after Krishna is coming Buddha and Kalki. So that's roughly chronological order. And yet, as I said, in his Bhagavatam commentary, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that this numbering, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, is not necessarily chronological order. It's just numbering in this particular list. Is that clear? So it seems to be more or less chronological, this list, but Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that it's not necessarily that it's just the numbering of this list, like number 1 in this list, number 2 in this list. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I understood, Prabhuji. As per Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he said it's not fixed. So when we say next time, we can name either as a fifth incarnation, Ram avatar as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so here in the text today, what we are reading, fifth incarnation as the Kapila, it is
Panchama Kapilo Nama. The fifth is
so,
named
so Shloka
Kapila.
itself says Panchama Kapila. So will that Shloka meaning will change? Panchama Rama Avatara kind of, it's very confusing to me, Prabhuji. Accepting is very okay. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying that yes, there shall be change. Earlier I was also understanding, but Shloka itself is saying Panchama Kapila, then Sastha, then Saptami also. These all are mentioned in the verse, Bhagavatam verse itself. So that's totally confusing.
I don't think it's something to be confused about, and you could take it either way. Take it that Panchama Kapila means that Kapila is the fifth incarnation, or take it that Panchama Kapila means that he's the fifth in this particular list of incarnations. Either way, I don't see any harm.
Okay, thank you.
And since the incarnations are Avatara, Hyasankhya, since you can't count them anyway,
yeah.
Any list you make is going to be somewhat arbitrary, because there's no end to the incarnations of the Lord. They're like the waves of the ocean. They never stop. So even if you say, okay, if you're stand at the ocean, here's the first wave, the second wave, the third wave. In one sense, it's meaningless because the waves are simply coming eternally. So I wouldn't lose too much sleep over it if I were you. Take it either way, that it's the fifth in the list or he's the fifth incarnation chronologically. Either way, there's no harm.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an entirely satisfying answer, but
yeah,
that's what I've got.
That's fine, Prabhuji. I mean, this was the first question. Second question, if time permits, I can ask related to Kapila itself. There is another Kapila that is atheist. He also talks about Sankhya, but he does not talk about the yoga to linking, personal form. So can you put light on that? He also claims that the, Sankhya is this material, breaking up the material things in different way. So
yeah, I'm not historically, I'm not exactly sure what Prabhupada's referring to, but he mentions it very often. That very often when Kapila comes up, he'll mention this, that there's an atheistic Kapila. And I know that there's no, how could I say, there's no original Vedic Sankhya Shastra. All of the literature about Sankhya is a later creation coming, some hundreds or maybe 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. So there's no ancient Vedic original scripture on Sankhya, except what we learn in the Bhagavatam and in some other Puranas. So much of what is studied by scholars as Sankhya Yoga today is a later development, and that later development, not always, but sometimes is described in an atheistic way. That is just a description of the elements and their interactions without any mention or consideration of Bhagavan. So I don't know exactly what Srila Prabhupada is referring to, except that Sankhya as it's studied today is often atheistic. But who this person, this imposter Kapila is, historically, I don't really know.
Understand that atheist Sankhya, so that we should avoid that kind of philosophy. Is that
we should avoid the atheistic conclusions of modern and later Sankhya, but we can certainly understand and study Sankhya as given in Bhagavad Gita, as given in the Bhagavatam. Because that Sankhya, when it's understood properly, is, as Prabhupada said, is non-different from devotional service.
Yeah.
Just like yoga, if we think we want to be a yogi and get, caught up in, asana and breathing exercises, but forget Krishna, that's condemned. But if we understand yoga as part of bhakti yoga, then that's proper. Or karma yoga. If we want to just do rituals or just do pious works and forget about Krishna, that's condemned. But if we want to do karma yoga in the sense of dedicating all our work to Krishna, that's approved, and that's non-different from devotional service. So same thing with Sankhya. If we forget Krishna, it's condemned. And if we understand it as coming from Krishna, then it's simply part of devotional service.
Yeah, understood, Prabhuji. It clarifies.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Anyone else?
Hare Krishna, Acharya Prabhu, Krishna Kirtan Das. Please accept my obeisances on Vishnu Prabhupada. Nice to see you today.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, thank you. I know we have very less time, maybe very short. About modern science, you mentioned, that's also Sankhya, right? So Sankhya and Sankhya Yoga, that makes two different path, right? Because Sankhya, even if Sankhya analytical study of the matter, but ultimate purpose, one cannot reach the cause of all causes by practicing Sankhya, just Sankhya.
Right.
On the other hand, the way we understand that by practicing Sankhya Yoga, one can understand Krishna, the cause of all causes. So in that sense, Sankhya, one should only learn the Sankhya from Sankhya yogis, or on the spiritual aspect, not the material aspect at all. That'll bewilder.
Yes, absolutely. I didn't mean to say or imply that modern science is exactly the same as yoga, just saying that conceptually,
Yes.
and in its methodology and ideas, it's similar and shares a lot with it, because it's a universal aspect of human nature to want to analyze and understand and
Yes.
account and enumerate the world around us. And especially in Vedic philosophy, this counting and enumerating is a very big part. I didn't mean that it's exactly the same as
Yeah, I think you
proper
stated
Sankhya
right.
yoga.
I think you stated correct. It's not, I'm not just saying. The Nyaya aspect also, you stressed that Nyaya aspect of spiritual teaching consists of Sankhya philosophy, right? For us, the Nyaya, the logic.
Yes.
I forgot which are we. That's the Bhagavatam, isn't it? For us, Nyaya is the Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is Nyaya for us.
Say that again, please.
Srimad Bhagavatam is a Nyaya for us, because three Nyaya and Sruti, Smriti and Nyaya.
I don't know if there's much like explicitly Nyaya, just like you won't in the Bhagavatam. So I'm not exactly sure how to answer that.
No,
But,
Srimad Bhagavatam
our use
Nyaya.
of logic and reason and understanding, that's our Nyaya in devotional service.
Is my line is bad, or Acharya Prabhu's line is bad, I think. Vishnugata Prabhu, you're saying something?
It looked like he got interrupted.
Oh.
His service got interrupted.
The Srimad Bhagavatam is not
I'm
Nyaya.
sorry.
Srimad Bhagavatam is Vedanta Bhagavatam.
Comment.
Okay.
It's not Nyaya.
But any bona fide sampradaya, we know that we have to have a commentary on Sruti, Smriti, and Nyaya. So I was checking if
Yes, yeah, exactly. Good point. In that sense, and now analyze Bhagavatam, it's not done. It's
okay. Sure. I think.
You're kind of having bad connection, Prabhu.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Dhananjay, back to you. Thank you.
Okay. Hare Krishna. We want to thank Acharya Prabhu for the wonderful class today. Very informative. Tonight we want to invite the devotees for the shloka reading or shloka learning class. If you're interested in memorizing shlokas, the English, the Sanskrit translations, please join us at 6:40 tonight. Also at 7 o'clock, we have our Srila Prabhupada Leela night, where we read about and discuss the wonderful pastimes of Srila Prabhupada in setting up, founding ISKCON, and all the activities that were involved in that.
sorry, I got lost there, everyone.
Okay, Acharya Prabhu is back. Any?
Yeah, it seems I get, every time I give class, I get knocked off at least once. You can
Any closing comments?
continue, Prabhu.
Okay. Now we're just making announcements for tonight's, tonight's classes. That's all, and also giving our gratitude to you.
And I liked Vishnu Gada's point that Bhagavatam is actually Vedanta.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Gratitude to you, Acharya Prabhu, to all the devotees that came out today to participate and hear Srimad Bhagavatam. May you all have a wonderful Krishna conscious day, and hope to see you tomorrow. Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you so much, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Prabhu. Very nice class.
Patitanam
Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo.
Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda.
Thank you.